Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to AlphaBiolabs breakfast webinar entitled Head Hair Drug Testing, How Does It Work? It's great that so many of you can join us this morning. Thank you very much for your time. By way of introduction, my name's Andrew Priestley, and I'm the Marketing Manager for the legal sector at AlphaBiolabs. And I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Ashley Hodgkinson. Ashley is our Sample Collections Manager, and she has extensive testing experience for DNA, drug and alcohol testing in the UK. Ashley will lead the webinar this morning and I will act as your facilitator, conscious that you will have busy days ahead, so we will keep it to within the 30 minutes. In terms of the agenda, we'll start by answering two questions. How are drugs stored in head hair? And how do we test head hair strands for drugs? We'll then look at the difference between an overview analysis and a segmented analysis and how to interpret the all-important test results. We'll then finish by just looking at some of the most common ways that people try to cheat the testing system, and then there will be a Q&A session as well. Now, we ran this webinar yesterday and we found a lot of people started asking about alcohol testing, which we obviously cover at AlphaBiolabs as well. But this webinar is specifically focused on drug testing only, and in particular, head hair drug testing. Because we're using the Zoom technology, as attendees, by default, both your microphone and cameras are switched off. So please just use the Q&A function throughout to ask any questions that you may have. We'll also be issuing optional polls during the webinar, and there is a short post-webinar survey. I would encourage you to please get involved in the polls and the survey. Your feedback is invaluable to us for future planning of these webinars. If you have any technical issues or anything else, you also got access to the chat function. Please just send a message and that will come through to myself and I will do my best to help you. Okay, so we'll make a start. We're going to launch the opening poll, which will appear on your screen in a moment. It's just one question. Please have a look at that and you've got a choice of answers. Have a go at the question. Lots of responses coming through. I'm going to give you another 15 seconds for other people. I think most of you answer that now. Okay, so the question is, how many days after the use of a drug will it first be detected in a sample of head hair? I'm going to share the results with you. So interesting set of results there. So the most popular answer there, response, was for 3 to 5 days. 53% of you think it's 3 to 5 days. 16% instantly, and 16% also 1 week, and 15% 2 weeks. Well, the correct answer is the 15% of you that said 2 weeks. So two weeks is the answer there. Thank you very much for your response to that. Ashley's going to talk to you now about that in more detail. Over to you, Ashley.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about drug testing, mainly in head hair, but also other methods if your client doesn't have sufficient head hair. So like Andrew said, make use of the Q&A function if there is anything that I've not covered that you want some more detail on. And we'll cover those at the end of the presentation. So to start off, it's important to look about how the drugs get into the head hair. How are we seeing them? How do they travel from ingestion into the root of the sample so that we can test them here at AlphaBiolabs? And this links into the poll that you've just completed with Andrew. So basically what happens is once someone ingests a drug, it's absorbed into the bloodstream, and each hair follicle on your head has its own blood supply. So the drug presence is then pushed out through the hair follicle, and then when we cut the sample, it's present within the follicle. As your hair grows, it travels further along the sample, so further down your head hair, and that's how we can see it in like monthly time frames or even up to a year. Now that process itself, as Andrew mentioned in your poll, can take 2 weeks for a drug from ingestion to be present within that sample. The process from ingestion to the root is roughly 7 to 10 days, but it needs to grow through so that we can cut it and it's present in the sample that we collect. So for that whole process, we're looking at around about 2 weeks. Why is this important? It's very, very important for cases where you're looking to cover a specific time frame. So if, for instance, we were looking to test somebody today who'd consumed some drugs last night, we would need to wait 2 weeks for that to show within the hair sample. We couldn't take the sample today because yesterday would not be covered in that time frame. We need to give it that 2 weeks to grow through and be present in the sample. So it's really important to consider that when you're sending someone for drug testing in head hair, that if you are looking for a specific time frame, that it is going to be covered within the analysis. And that's something we can help you with if you do complete a referral with us. So we know how it gets there now. We know how long to wait until it's present in the sample. But how do we test it for drugs? So when we're looking at a head hair sample for drug use, we are looking for persistent drug misusers. We're not looking for one-off events. So it's not going to detect a single episode of consuming drugs. It's looking for a more frequent drug user. We're looking for not only the main drug groups, which we'll come on to, but also the metabolites, which I'll explain in a little bit more detail later on. And how long can we cover? So it's great that we want to do a sample. It's fine that we need to cover a certain amount of time, but how long can we realistically look back in head hair? So the maximum time frame that we cover is 12 months. So for that, we need a sample of hair that covers 12 centimeters to allow for that growth through the time frame. We only cover up to 12 months because the guidelines state that after this time can be affected by external factors and the results aren't as accurate. So we'll only go up to the 12 months time frame. And for that, we need 12 centimeters of head hair. So head hair grows roughly an average rate of 1 centimeter a month. So for every centimeter of head hair that your client has, we can provide a month's analysis. So for instance, if you've got my hair, it's quite long, it's over 12 centimeters. So we would know that we could go back up to 12 months if that's what was necessary for your client. If they only had 3 centimeters of head hair, then we could only look back 3 months. 6 centimeters would be 6 months, and so on. So it's entirely dictated by the length of the sample that is available from your client at the time of testing. And again, that's something that's really important to consider. If you have a client who has 2 centimeters of head hair and you want to look back over the last 6 months, it's not going to be possible using that sample. So you'd want to look for alternative ways to get that time frame covered. Or you would want to go back and discuss with either the court or the other parties to state that this is what's available and see what the preferred method would be. There are 2 types of analysis that are available for head hair testing. So again, it totally depends on what you're looking for. And this we'll loop back to at the end of the presentation. It's really important to consider what you need to get out of the testing before you go ahead and instruct. And again, if you contacted us, we could advise you on what would be the best options. But for head hair testing, we look at 2 types. We look at an overview and a segmented analysis. So I'm just going to talk about what those 2 things mean. So for your overview analysis, this is looking at the hair in larger time frames. So it's not breaking it down as much as a segmented test would. So there's a little diagram on the screen. This is a sample of hair that measures 12 centimeters. So in theory, we could cover 12 months with this sample. If you decided to do so, but you wanted an overview analysis, we would look at this in 3-month segments. So you would get 4 results, which covered a 12 months time frame, and each result would represent 3 months as a whole. So you would get 4 individual results, 1 for the first 3 months, 1 for the second 3 months, and so on for the full 12. This type of test is beneficial for people who have been ordered to do testing, but know that they will test negative. So they've never used the drug or haven't used it within the time frame. So they know that this will be a negative result. It's beneficial for them. It's also beneficial if you're just wanting to get a kind of first time reading for a client to look at where their drug use is at so that it can be compared later down the line, especially if they're going through rehabilitation programs or trying to abstain from use. So it's useful in those types of scenarios. What it won't do is show you patterns and trends. So looking at the limitations of this type of testing, because it's looking at 3 months as a whole and not each month individually, you wouldn't necessarily see those patterns and trends as much as you would in a segmented analysis, which we'll come on to in just a moment. It's an average over that 3-month time frame. So for instance, if you had a client who said that they'd abstained for 2 months, but then had used in the 3rd month, you may find that you get a positive result during that 3-month segment. And that's not necessarily what you are looking for with your client if you are wanting to show that they had abstained prior or were beginning to reduce their use. So like I say, this would be beneficial for someone to get an initial reading, or for someone who is asked to provide a negative drug sample. If we move on to the segmented analysis, which to be fair is the more popular one of the two, purely because it can look at patterns and trends within the sample. So again, the same diagram, a 12 centimetre sample covering 12 months, but this time we are doing a segmented analysis. So instead of looking at them in 3 months as a whole, we're going to look at each individual month. So you would get 12 results for this test, 1 representing each month that was available from the client's hair. So like I said, this is really beneficial to look at patterns and trends of someone's use, especially if they have previously used drugs and are trying to either reduce their use or abstain completely. You would see that within the sample as they gradually reduced over the months, where you're not necessarily going to see that the same in an overview analysis, because you're looking at the time frame as a wider amount of time. So if you do have a client who is looking to prove the reduce or their abstinence after use, then segmented analysis would be the best option. So we've spoken about how much hair we need lengthwise, so how long the hair needs to be and what we can do with that sample. And we've spoken about how it gets there. But what is the collection process? What are your clients going to be asked to provide in order for us to be able to provide you with the results? So we need to take a sample of head hair, as we've already explained. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are looking at the most recent growth of hair, which comes directly from the root. So that means that any samples taken do need to be cut from the root and will leave a small bald patch. Our collectors are trained to make it as discreet as possible, especially looking at the way that your client's hair sits and taking it from the underneath where possible, but it would leave a bald patch. We usually are looking to take 2 samples, sometimes 3, depending on what we're requested to test for, and each sample is around about 200 strands of hair, so about the width of a pencil. We are very honest about this. We would discuss this with your clients at the time of the appointment, and it would be up to them to provide consent before any samples were taken. But it's just useful for you to understand what would be expected of the client in this process. So what do we do if you don't have enough head hair? Like I said before, we are dictated by the length of your client's hair that's available at the time of testing. So if they only have 2 centimeters and you want to look back over 12 months, what are your other options? Well, there's 3 main options. The first one would be to collect a sample of body hair if it was available. I've listed some types of body hair that we'll collect here. So underarm, beard, chest and leg. We can also do back, forearm, whatever your client is comfortable to provide. However, it's important to note that if you do test a sample of body hair, it will cover 12 months and that will be as an overview. So it cannot be segmented. The other 2 options are to collect a sample of toenails from your client or a sample of fingernails, both of which give different time frames. So your toenails would be a 12-month overview, fingernails a 6-month overview. And again, that can't be segmented. So that would be that time frame as a whole. So what drugs can we test for? Here is a list of the standard drugs that we test for, the most commonly requested. We can also test for a range of other drugs. Even if you need a test for a drug group that's not currently on this screen, it's more than likely something we can help you with. You would just need to get in touch. It might not be something that's commonly requested. I mentioned earlier on that we're looking at drug groups and the metabolites. And what I mean by that is within these drug groups that you can see on the screen, there are other metabolites within them. So opiates, for example, you can see there in the middle column. Within the drug group of opiates, you have codeine, dihydrocodeine, morphine, and heroin. So if you can't see a drug that you're looking for on the screen and you want to make a referral, get in touch. It might just be that it belongs to one of these drug groups and it's one of their metabolites. So coming to the end of the first part now, in relation to head-her testing, we've spoken about how it gets there, what we need to do the test and how much of a sample would be taken and what the alternatives are. But I thought it was a good time to just recap over what we've discussed, because the biggest thing that we come across here that either delays cases or stops samples being taken is that we have insufficient head hair. So if you have a client who has 3 centimeters of head hair, your options are a 3-month overview. So that would be one result covering 3 months as a whole, or a segmented test where you would get a result for each individual month, which of course would be 3 results. Again, body hair, nails, but that would be as a 12-month overview if we needed to look back longer. If your client has 6 centimeters of head hair, we can still do an overview. This time you would get 2 results, and each one of those results would cover a 3-month time frame. Or if you wanted to look at those patterns and trends, as we spoke about, you can have that segmented and you would get 6 individual results. So it's all about knowing what you're looking to ascertain from the results, what is available at the time, and then comparing that with what we are able to provide with you. Like I say, if there's anything that you're unsure about, always get in touch with us. We can listen to what your client has available and what you want to know, and then we can offer what type of testing would be more beneficial for your client. So with that, I'm just going to hand back over to Andrew, and he's going to launch a second poll for you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ashley. Okay, hopefully you found that useful. I'm just going to launch a second poll now. It's got 2 questions in there, which covers the content that Ashley's just gone through. So have a go at those, please. You should be able to see those questions on your screen now, and I'm going to give you some time to answer those. It's great. Lots of responses coming through. Okay, I think just about all of you have answered that now, so thank you very much for doing that. I'm just going to end the poll and I'll share the results with you. So the first question, what is the maximum window of detection for drug usage that can be found with head hair testing? And 96% of you got that absolutely correct. It's up to 12 months. Realistically, it's up to 12 months that we can test for. Second question, if your client provided a 6 centimeter head hair sample for an overview only, how many results would you get? And 66% of you got that correct. It's actually 2 results, each covering a 3-month time period. So well done to you guys, and thank you to all of you for completing that poll. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and with that I will hand back to Ashley.
Brilliant. So we're going to move on now to, we've decided what type of sample we're going to take, how long that will cover and what drugs we're testing for, but how do we interpret the results once they arrive? So there's 2 types of options for her drug test results. The first one is known as a certificate of analysis. This is a very basic report. Again, it's more commonly requested if someone is just looking to provide a negative report to court, where no write-up would be required, no additional explanation would be needed. The certificate of analysis would be fine for that purpose. It does just include the basic results. So if it was negative, or if something was detected in the sample, the value of that and the cutoff level it was tested against, but there is no write-up or any additional information in a certificate of analysis. If you do need that write-up, if you need an explanation into what the results mean, any medication that was disclosed, how we got to the results that we got to, any additional things that the lab think you should consider about the results, then you're going to want to look for a statement of witness report. I would always recommend a statement of witness report with a hair drug test, unless, like I say, you know that that sample is going to be negative and no further information would be required. And we've tried to make the statement of witness report as easy to understand as possible, not complex based on feedback that we've had. But if you do ever need any further information with the statement of witness report, you can contact us and we'd be more than happy to talk you through it. So Andrew said in the beginning on the agenda, we'd discuss briefly about common ways that people try to cheat the testing system. So these are just things that we've seen here at AlphaBiolabs, where people have tried to get round providing a sample or provided a sample from somebody else. So the first two go hand in hand. We've seen people come in wearing wigs to sample collection appointments and also bringing in pre-cut samples that isn't theirs, but they're claiming is, in an envelope with them to hand to the collector at the time of the appointment. Unfortunately, we can't accept those samples and we do have to collect our own. It needs to be in our presence and it has to be our collector that cuts the sample. If a donor does come in wearing a wig, we would have to ask them to remove it, as it does need to be a sample of their own head hair. We have other people attending appointments for them, which we'll come on to in a minute. We've had people that have shaved their heads and their bodies, cut the fingers and toenails short, so we're not able to collect a sample, and even apply cosmetic treatments or excessively straighten the hair in the hope that this will reduce the drug concentration that's present. So yeah, shaving head hair and body hair, we can look at nails, cutting off finger and toenails. We do have alternative methods that we can use in those situations, but these are just things that we see when we come out to do collections. So the one that most people have the questions about is usually the cosmetic treatments. So if you've seen our collectors before, if they've been out to test one of your clients, you'll know that they complete some paperwork when they come to their appointments. And within this paperwork, we do ask questions about any chemical or heat hair treatments that your client might have used during the testing timeframe. This is so that it can be taken into consideration at the laboratory, so that they can consider it within the results, because sometimes it can have an effect on the samples. So if your client bleaches, dyes or perms their hair or straightens it excessively, so daily, that could potentially result in a possible false negative for drug testing. However, any hairsprays, gels or excessive cleaning that they do during that time will have no effect on the sample. And this again would be detailed within your statement of witness report if it was disclosed by the client, and that's why they're always useful to go for. So I spoke a few slides ago about sending someone else to give a sample. We do have a strict chain of custody that we follow here at AlphaBiolabs when we are doing sample collections, whereby we take a photograph at the time of the appointment that is date and time stamped, so we know that it's from that appointment. We also ask for identification, ideally photographic, and all the photographs that are taken are included within the report, so you can see that it is your client that attended the appointment for the sample. The sample is then tracked once it's collected all the way back to our laboratory and through the lab, so that if there is any dispute over whose sample was tested, we're able to provide that information. This not only gives you peace of mind that we've tested the right person, gives us peace of mind, but it also gives your client peace of mind as well, that it's their sample that was taken, that was sent to the laboratory, and it's their results that you're looking at in court. So which test do you choose? We've come to do a referral. What are the things that we need to consider? And we covered this a little bit earlier, but the main thing that you need to figure out is, what am I looking to get out of this test? Why is it being done? What sort of time frame do we want to cover? What do we want to test for? And how detailed does our report need to be? And this is something that we're more than happy to discuss with you. We can go through what your requirements are, make suggestions, and that you can take back to court if you wish to discuss whether it is something that is required. And then we can provide quotations that you can also supply. So the main thing to do is realize, why are we doing it and what are we wanting to get out of the results? So I'm just going to hand it back over to Andrew, who's going to do your final poll of the day, and before we do some questions.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ashley. Okay, so I'm going to launch the closing poll now. Just one question. I've noticed that quite a few questions have come in on the Q&A, so thank you very much for that, and I'll hand back to Ashley in a moment. We'll answer a couple of those. What we will also do is tomorrow you'll get an email from us with a link to a recording of this webinar, and we'll also list all the answers to any question that's asked this morning. So please do use the opportunity in the next few minutes to add in any more questions that you might have. Okay, so just going to launch the final poll. Just one question, just your honest feedback really, if you feel this morning's been valuable or not. 3 options there. I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that. Thank you. Okay, I think most of you respond to that. Let's give you a couple more seconds. Okay, that's great. I'm just going to end that and quickly share the results. So fantastic response there. 84% of you have said yes, absolutely, which is great. And the remainder of you have said to a certain extent, but you'd like to learn more, which is really positive feedback. So thank you all for taking the time to do that. So I'll just hand back to Ashley. Ashley, we've got a couple of questions, perhaps in the time we've got left, you could answer.
Yeah, definitely. They're still coming through, so carry on sending them. We'll answer as many as we can, obviously sticking to time. So there's 2 people that have asked a similar question about, do the same measurements apply to different textures of hair? So would tightly coiled hair be measured in its natural state or straightened out? And we had this question yesterday about any afro hair that we've collected. So the answer is it totally depends on the hair that we take at the time. So it's difficult to generalize because sometimes they are really tightly coiled and they can't be straightened, and sometimes they can be straightened out. So it does depend. If they are too tightly coiled and we can't straighten them accurately enough to be able to segment them, then we would report the sample as an overview. And this is something we would contact you about once the sample was in the laboratory and we'd been able to assess it. And we would contact you and explain this and advise how that overview would look and what the report would look like. So it really depends on the specific hair sample that we get in at the time. Can a test be taken in a prison? Yeah, we do these quite often. So it takes a little bit longer to book the appointment because we have to apply to go in, especially taking in scissors. But it can be done, and it is done quite often. We just need to know the prisoner number and where they're being held. And then we'll sort the rest out. But like I say, I would just give maybe an additional week or 2 for the results because we have to wait for visiting times and letters of approval to be able to do that. There's a lot of questions about growth rates, being slower. We go on an approximate and average growth rate for head hair, which is a centimetre. It is not changed based on anyone's ethnicity. So it would be the same for all sample donors. And it's not a question that we ask on the form either about their ethnicity, because I've seen that as one of the questions too. It's a standard average growth rate set out by the Society of Hair Testing. So we follow their guidelines, and it's them who kind of make sure that we're testing accurately. So it would be the same for all ethnicities across the board. How long will drugs remain in the hair? Well, they'll stay there for as long as we need to test, so up to 12 months. So they will stay there. They'll stay there long after, but we're not testing any further back than 12 months. It's looking at the method that you use as to whether they are detected. So like we said before, if you use a shorter sample, you'll see them for whatever time frame that can cover, but they stay in your hair for a very long time. So we can go back up to 12 months. Just conscious of time, Andrew, I'm just going to hand back over to you, and the rest of those will go up on the website, as you mentioned earlier.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ashley. Plenty of questions coming in. Apologies, we're not going to have time to answer them all on this live webinar, but we will provide answers to all those questions, and you'll receive those tomorrow morning. So just to finish off, why choose AlphaBiolabs? Well, we can provide a sample collection available from any UK address. We've also got 11 UK walk-in centres where your clients can go to, and we do free collections from there. The drug test results are normally issued within 3 to 5 working days following receipt of the sample in the laboratory. We provide user-friendly reports. You also get access to dedicated account and case managers throughout the testing process. And of course, we are fully accredited by UCAS, ISO 17025 and ISO 9001. We're currently running a special promotion as well. So for all legal drug testing, there's 15% off available at the moment up until the end of June. If you call us on the number there or the email testing@alphabiolabs.com and just quote drug 15, and that ensures that when you receive your bespoke quotation, that discount is included in that. You can also request a quotation on our website at alphabiolabs.co.uk. Just also wanted to mention that we are attending the Resolution National Conference in Birmingham next week, and I expect some of you will be attending that. So we will have a small stand there. Please do come over and say hello. Myself and a colleague will be present for the 2 days, so it'd be great to meet some of you if you are indeed going to that conference. Finally, just to finish off, if you could kindly complete the post-webinar surveys, you can see that it's just 3 very short questions, take you less than 30 seconds at the end of the webinar. It's just really invaluable to get your feedback because it enables us to make sure we are providing the right sort of webinar content for you going forward. So please do get in touch. We are the experts in legal DNA, drug and alcohol testing. There's our main methods of contact on the screen for you. We're also on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you're on those media, then please do look us up on there, give us a follow, and we'll follow you back. I just also finally wanted to mention our Giving Back campaign. So this is where every instruction we receive from you will donate £5 to 4 incredible charities who support some of the UK's most vulnerable children and families. It's just another reason to choose AlphaBiolabs. So all it leaves me to say is thank you very much for your time this morning. It is much appreciated. Have a great day. We hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you again on a future AlphaBiolabs webinar. Thanks very much, and goodbye.